light tarnished in relation to this, I have to say. And if you think getting rid of the triple lock will lead to a more peaceful world, you're deluded. And you're absolutely disgraceful and disingenuous to tell us that getting rid of the triple lock will not interfere with our neutrality. Our question here is to try and elicit details in relation to the mechanism in which you're doing it, how you're going to do that. And you refer to the consultative forum as given the prevailing view. That is also not correct. The consultative forum, which was handpicked, and on page 11 it says a large number of voices expressed the view. A large number of voices. It doesn't tell us who those voices were. It doesn't tell us it was the prevailing view. So you set up a mechanism for a pre-arranged final outcome, and this is the next step in it now. It's absolutely disgraceful and unacceptable. And if you think my opinions are strong, I'll tell you, the feeling on the ground is far, far more intense than what I'm expressing here.
Yeah, well, first of all, personal vitriol isn't going to change in my mind. Stop now. But through the chair now.
Sorry,
I have behaved
I apologise.
Absolutely in accordance with parliamentary procedure and processes here. And there's nothing abnormal about a government proposing a legislative proposal, publishing a general scheme, bringing it before the House for debate for all members of the House. And it will be obviously subject to pre-legislative scrutiny. And I've made it very clear. And what I find in the debate generally, and just to Deputy Howland's question, and point, that we envisage Dáil approval, government approval and Dáil approval. You could call it a double lock, but also that the legislation, and I've said this publicly, would have to be within the framework of the United Nations Charter and international humanitarian law, and that the spirit and esprit de corps of the United Nations would inform any decision by government and the Dáil, and to legislatively reflect that. And also then, the United Nations have endorsed the utilisation of the African Union, for example, or regional groups in terms of the peacekeeping missions, be it the European Union, be it the OSCE, or be it the African Union and others. And their potential, I just said as a potential for any decision to participate in the peacekeeping mission. But what I think we have to deal with honestly in the House, and I genuinely make the point that I don't feel the issue of the paralysis at the Security Council has been addressed by members of the House. So I'm labelled disgraceful, yet it seems to me people are suggesting by implication that it's okay that Russia, given its current status and nature as an imperial power, behaving disgracefully in the Ukraine, with its illegal invasion, destruction of 85% now of all energy infrastructure in Ukraine, that a power like that has a veto over whether we participate in peacekeeping or not, where they deploy the Wagner Group all over the world, in Africa and everywhere. Are we seriously suggesting that in this day and age, a power like Russia vetoes Ireland's participation in peacekeeping? And I can give examples. But we had to fight very hard in the Security Council in terms of Operation Althea, where we have 5 members in terms of Bosnia Herzegovina. And there was real challenge there. And we have 5 members they would have had to pull out. And it's really problematic. We see it in the Middle East. The Security Council is not, at this current, it's not fit for purpose anyway, in terms of the modern situation in the world, where there should be far greater, broader, representation and less vetoes.
I've never been given to personal vitriol, but I will repeat what I've said. Disgraceful, deluded, disingenuous. Sweet words of war have to be called out for what they were. A choreographed agenda to lose our neutrality has to be called out. The UN is the only safeguard in theory that we have. Yes, it's faulty. Yes, it must be changed with our help, with our involvement. And you constantly call out Russia. I'm on record repeatedly for calling out the illegal invasion of Ukraine. You have utterly failed to call out America, which has disgracefully used the veto over and over and over. You have utterly failed to call them out in relation to the supplyment of arms to Israel and the slaughter on the streets of Palestine. How dare you stand here and ask us to remain patient or use parliamentary, pleasant language. It's one of our last times to call out what you're doing, and what you're doing is not in our name. And there's a role of a General Assembly as well that has been utterly bypassed in your words, that has a very strong role in offsetting the veto. And you fail to mention all the other states that use the veto or threaten to use the veto. And belatedly in the last while you've raised America. I apologise for going over time, but the Tánaiste has had extra time, and he has the power on his side, and he has the narrative that we must challenge at every step and every minute of the way.
First of all, Deputy Howland raised the issue of, and he agreed that the UN needs reform. I think there's a problem here. And if we could, and the fundamental problem is this: there hasn't been a peacekeeping mission approved by the UN Security Council since 2014. When we are in the UN Security Council, and can I just say something to everybody in this House? Like, the consultative forum was not a pre-arranged. And what was disgraceful was the attempt to stop it from happening, and the attempt to undermine legitimate debate, legitimate consultation, to hear a wide variety of views, as we did here over 4 days. It was a good exercise, but people in this House, including Deputy Connolly and others, tried to demonise it before it started, tried to demonise it as it happened, and are now trying to do it afterwards. That is very regrettable, because we live in a democracy, and I can never get around why people sought to undermine a legitimate exercise in informing, and it was insightful, and people found it impressive. Maybe Deputy Connolly didn't, and it's not about getting rid of neutrality. The Fianna Fáil party was central from Eamon de Valera on in terms of our military neutrality. So there's no agenda whatsoever. But I've heard, but people don't seem to want to accept the realities of where we are. And I would respectfully suggest that it's deluded thinking that we should depend on the Security Council in respect of the sanctioning of any future peacekeeping missions, because we want to be participating in peacekeeping. That is our raison d'etre. That is our contribution. We're not a military power, and have never been a military power. You know, invariably, and I did reference the US actually in terms of the use of the veto, and I made the point earlier that US, China, and Russia have their interests, and increasingly, that is militating against UN Security Council sanction. The General Assembly in itself, and we've been strong advocates and proactive participants, we co-sponsored at the General Assembly the motion to admit Palestine to the United Nations.
Thank you.
But it's the Security Council, through the US veto, stop that from happening. And so there is real issues with the Security Council that have been glided over by members of the opposition here in respect of this core issue. Because essentially we're saying we won't be participating in any future peacekeeping missions at all if we allow the current situation.
The handpicked nature of the forum is not the same as demonising the forum.